All right. Well, welcome to the Downing Cut. Today, I have the pleasure. It's going to be a fun conversation because it is with Mr. Tim Earnhardt, an acclaimed filmmaker renowned for his award winning short films like Nemesis, Ricochet, and Safe, which brings a wealth of experience from directing high quality content for major companies. Today, we'll explore his creative journey and the stories behind his captivating work, and I'm honored to present my mentor, Mr. Tim Earnhardt. Welcome to the Downing Cut.
It's a pleasure, Joe. It's a pleasure.
I know you didn't know that you were my mentor until I actually said that you were my mentor, but I've been secretly watching you, you know.
You've been
So
stalking me, huh?
I have, and I've learned a lot, let me say. So I always like to start the conversation with everyone is what how did your journey start into the film industry?
Oh, wow. I started writing stories like in elementary school, and so creative writing was always a thing for me. Not that I knew how to put together necessarily beginning, middle, and end, but you have to start somewhere, right? Um, and then I just had a love for movies, and that I continued writing because writing was cheap. It didn't cost anything. It cost your time, you know. And so, as I studied filmmaking from books and some filmmakers I'd met, they they taught me a bunch of things, like always be prepared, always have a backup plan. Like if you're shooting outside and it's supposed to be sunny and then it happens to rain, okay, what's your backup plan? Oh, we can go shoot inside a whole different scene. um, and you know how to budget movies properly, and also pay attention to the edit. I when I make movies, I try to shoot for the edit. uh, I and when it comes to action, I shoot more because I learned there's sometimes you may not know you need more, and so. But a lot of those things I learned from directors, producers I met, and in the '90s I made a short film that really nobody saw. It was a 10-minute long, 11-minute long Steadicam shot in a bar in downtown Seattle, moving from characters to characters. It was really awful. It was just awful. And it shot on 16 millimeter at the time, and so we only had 4 takes to get it in because that's all I could afford for film.
Wow.
um,
Yeah.
and then I just stopped for a while because I had to do something with my life because it just obviously wasn't paying the bills. So, um, I went in to the like creative field, like ad agencies, and I worked my way up to a creative director. And then since I'd had this love for movies, when we started doing like green screen shoots, people were like, "Oh, you can do green screen shoots. Why don't you go and do these for us?" And I'm like, "Okay, I've never done a green screen shoot, but sure, why not?" you know? So you hire people that know all this stuff around you, and this is like early 2000s that happened. And then I got kind of disillusioned with the whole ad agency thing. And I decided, hey, I got to start writing again because that's what made me happy. And so I spent a year writing a workplace comedy script that eventually got optioned. And I wrote a sci-fi action thriller that got optioned and a sci-fi movie that got optioned. None of them got made or anything like that. But, I was repped at a creative artist agency for a little bit, and I had a manager, and those things were going pretty good, but I wanted to direct. That was my main thing. Writing to me was a means to an end, right? Um, so I kind of stopped the whole writing process. I put the brakes on it because I knew I needed to make short films. And the short films, they had to look like a Hollywood movie. If anybody's going to hire you to direct, or if you have a script that people love and you want to direct it, they want to see what you're capable of. And they're not gonna hire you if your movie doesn't look like a Hollywood movie. If it just looks like, You shot it on an iPhone, but you didn't do any color grading to it. You didn't work on the sound. You didn't work on the visual effects or a whole slew of things, as you know, through post production. So that's been kind of the short version of my journey.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting you say that because I've seen a lot of short films that kind of just exactly what you just said. They take a phone, they shoot it, and that's it. That's all they're doing. And maybe they'll add some sound effects here. Some of them lack some sound effects, and it's interesting though. And I don't, it's weird because you're the first person, like literally right now, that I've ever heard anyone say that. Shoot a movie, make it look like Hollywood, and that's when you're started to start into the progress. Most people just say, just shoot something, right?
I think the problem is too, people just want to get their work out there so quick. They don't think of the quality. And it's funny, a great piece of advice I had was that sound is actually more important than picture. And it's absolutely true. People will forgive like maybe a grainy shot here and there, but with all the plugins and stuff that there's out nowadays, you can clean those shots up. But people will not forgive bad sound. They just won't. That will take them out of the experience more than the picture quality is. And a lot of filmmakers don't understand that. Like, so make your sound quality the best you can. Like if we have in the trick I use is in my shorts at least, if if there's some background noise happening with the sound, um, it's always good to put like an undercurrent of sound underneath it. Like it could, if it's outside, have some birds chirping. If it's at night, maybe have some growls of thunder happening. Anything to hide the imperfections of the audio if you don't want to go back in the studio and re-record it, right?
Yeah,
So you can always do simple things like that to make your sound better, you know?
absolutely. What, from your experience now, what makes a good actor?
Wow. I think for me, from sitting in the director's chair, um, somebody that asks questions about the script. It could be, the infamous, like, what's my character motivation here? It could be, well, you're kind of a cyborg robot, so you're just a killing machine. That's it. It could be as simple as that. But I think the actor knows what they're coming into doing. There's no disillusion. Um, if they don't understand what's going on with their character, like, ask me questions. I may not have all the answers, but there's been a lot of times where the actors have a lot of input on why they think a character should do this or that, or why something should be changed in the script because they don't think their character would do that. It's unbelievable. Because what you're really trying to do when you're shooting something is capture the truth of what somebody in real life would do in that situation. And we all would do maybe different things in certain situations, but as close to the truth as possible. And I think that's what makes good actors from that perspective. Another perspective is when they are not looking like they're acting. Okay. That's to me the best thing when they're just coming across natural. Because I've encountered a lot of actors that just overact. You can tell they're acting, and that's not what you want. Like when that's kind of happened with me, I'm like, can you just like tone it down a little bit? Just tone it down.
Yeah,
You know, you don't need to overdo it. You don't need to sell it that much. Just almost like be yourself in a lot of ways. Um, so it's, you know, I try not to get in the way of the actor. I let them know, hey, this is the blocking. You're going from A to B to C. Um, so let's see how you would do it. And if there's something I think should be changed, then we talk about it. At least I think that's what I do. I mean, I've worked with you on how many movies now?
I lost count.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
4, 5.
But I mean, how would you describe me as a director?
I think you're the direction that I've seen. Um, I don't know. You never talked to me, so I, no, I mean, you give me pointers, you give me tips to kind of get to the level that you're looking for, and I think that's it. I mean, you haven't been overbearing or micromanaging. You haven't been overemphasizing anything. You're just like, try it this way, try it
I
that
think
way.
I think if there's something specific I really need, because I know it's part of the story, then that's when I kind of come in and I'll say, "Hey, Joe, can you pick up the pen?" Right?
Right? Yeah, a lot
And
of
we
it's
got to we
blocking.
got to get an insert of the pen. You picking up the pen or
Right.
something? If it's important. But um, for the most part, it's like it's an actor's job to act. I don't want to get in their way, but if I feel like they could do it better or maybe a different way. I mean, I feel like that's the job of the director. Get out of the actor's way. If they should understand what you're shooting and why you're shooting it this way. And that if any questions come up, it should come up before you're actually shooting it. But you should all be on the same page when you're yelling out action at that point. At that point, there might be just like little changes here and there. If I have to give sweeping changes, then I know I probably didn't hire the best actor.
And that's why I've only been in 5 movies. So your short films such as Nemesis, Ricochet, and Safe have garnered numerous awards. Can you share the inspiration behind these films and what you believe contributed to their success?
Well, I feel like it started with Safe, then it went with Ricochet, then it went to Nemesis, and I felt like each one was a building block. Safe was I don't know if I should say it was born out of necessity, but I wanted to do another short film. I did not have a lot of money to do it at the time, but I figured, well, if I'm going to do another short film, because I just came off of working with Damien, which was like the workplace comedy that you were in. I wanted to
That's
do
when we
some
first
sort of,
met.
yeah, that's when we
Yeah.
first met. Um, so it was interesting. With Safe, I wanted to do kind of a thriller. And it didn't start off as a sci-fi thriller. It just started off as like a thriller with elements of horror. And I wanted to use props and costumes that I used in a previous short film that didn't get much screen time at all in the least bit. And so I spent all this money on these really expensive props. And I'm like, well, what can I do with these props? What's a story I can come up with? And that's kind of how Safe came about. And it turned into this kind of little uh, sci-fi thriller. And it cost I think $5,000 to make, and most of that went to the house that I rented to shoot. And
Yeah.
so for
Beautiful
the
house.
weekend. And so, yeah. Other than that, that turned into a success. And again, I kind of feel like with Ricochet and Nemesis afterwards, everything's like a sci-fi action thriller in some sort of way, and it just ended up that way. It's not that I was setting out to do those kinds of movies, but I like mixing genres, and so when it came to Ricochet after that, I had this idea, with kind of a clones of people that were showing up and in this panic room. And I honestly I couldn't find anything with a panic room. Like nobody's going to rent out a house with a panic room either. So we ended up finding this speakeasy in Seattle that was from an old bank, and it had a vault in there. And I'm like, okay, now I can write this sequence around a vault because that's kind of cool. That brings
Yeah.
production value. I'm always looking for production value. Um, so, that's how that one. But then I also would like, okay, I got to up my game. The costumes have to be better. The masks have to be better. The guns have got to be bigger. Because I want to like do a bigger movie than the previous one. Right. So I think Ricochet ended up costing me $25,000 to make. Um, yeah, because the locations were expensive. I had to get insurance. And at that time, the costumes and all the guns were super expensive too. Um, so then when it came to Nemesis, it was even a bigger challenge because then we have this kind of humanoid robot um, where there just had to be this metal armor, the stuff you wore, the metal armor and stuff. I,
Hmm.
I remember that so clearly because the person making it was out of Toronto. And I'm like, man, this would be so great to have this LED armor in the movie as part of the costume. I'm like, I'm never going to get that. It was super expensive. I think all that metal armor cost like 3 grand or something just for that, right? And I ended up, as I was kind of getting your costume together, from the mask, the silicone mask was like $1,000, $1,500, and
Holy
you know,
smokes!
getting, and then I think most of the rest of it was from Amazon, like bits and pieces. Shoulder pads were from the UK, but then I was like, I need this LED armor. This is what's really going to um, make this special and make this different because you're trying to hide the fact that there is a human inside of this thing. You want people to forget that, and that's why, like, your costume was like 8 grand out of that. And then you start bringing in like mini guns and all that. Like, the mini gun that was used was like an $800 prop. And, you know, you start bringing in the masks, the custom masks again, that Yuba wore, so on and so forth. Your budget, like that one was $40,000. And all of that is on the screen, because once I went for the whole LED costume, then I'm like, hey, what if we do LED on all these like weapon stations? Why don't we need lights to light up this background. We need like, I start going overboard on all this stuff, not because I want to, but I'm like, it's going to make this movie look like $1,000,000 at the end of the day. If I cheap out on it now, what am I saving? A couple grand when I've already put like 35 into it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and that's the problem. I think that's my problem. As the budgets went up, I'm like, well, what's my next movie and how much is that going to cost? I start,
Right.
because I'm not trying to go even more money, but there's certain things you just can't get away from when you're renting out locations and production design things and props and insurance. Insurance, as you know, is expensive too. It can be really expensive. So, um, you know, each one of these, I feel like they're in the same universe as each other, but they're completely, you know, independent films from each other. So, uh, they've been fun to make. They've been, as you know, they can be painful because there's a lot of setups to do. But I feel like it's all worth it at the end when you have like a decent short film at the end. It kind of makes it all worth it.
Yeah, I don't think the setup is painful. I mean, on our side, I think it's expected, right? As an actor, you're going to go through the motions. I guess there's one thing I want to ask you that I don't think I've ever asked you before is why do you choose to reuse the same actor for different roles within
Oh,
one movie?
like in Nemesis, like you played two
A
different roles,
doctor,
right?
a doctor, the cyborg, and then another dude
Oh yeah,
that's
yeah, that's
on the
right. You
wall.
played three, and Yuma played three as well too.
And it was right after I broke my hand
Yeah.
on
Oh
top.
my God, that was. I was just. I thought I was going to cry when you told me you broke your hand and you fell off that scooter. Oh God. Excuse me. That it's really good. So like Ayuba was out of almost necessity. We knew we were going to use Ayuba as a scientist, kind of an extra, and he was going to be one of the masked guards. But then when one of our other masked guards ended up dropping out, I was like, okay, Ayuba, you're going to be playing both of them. We just can't shoot you both at the same time, but you're going to play both. I mean, nobody's going to know you're switching masks. That's all, and
Yeah.
switching guns. That's the only thing you're doing. With you, it was interesting. You know, there, there's a couple things I know about you. Number one, you're good being behind the mask. You just can't stand there. You have to do something like head turns or there has to be some movement because that's what draws your character out to an audience, right? Well, that's what makes your character unique. But also, I wanted to give you a speaking part because I didn't. I I felt bad all the times you've been behind masks for the most part, and I'm like, okay, well, I can trust you in the costumes, and I trust your abilities behind a mask. And that's why in Nemesis, the two masked characters you were, I mean, you did great for those characters. Exactly it. I mean, and I knew you could take the what I call the stress of being in a silicone mask for 12 hours, and being in all that armor and stuff. Like, there's a lot of people that just can't do it. And so I knew that. So I honestly felt like after I wrote it, I was like, if I'm going to ask him to play these monsters, if you will, I got to give you a speaking part that has like some significance, not just a line or two, but has some significance. Because I knew you could do that as well too. And it's easier working with one actor playing three different parts than it is with three different actors. Play like it's especially if they're behind a mask. Nobody's going to know. Nobody's going
Right.
to know.
Yep. Yep. Well, it was an honor for me, so I felt privileged.
Well, after Nemesis, I bet you were like sitting there, man, I should have just taken that doctor part so I didn't have to be in the armor and the silicone makeup all day.
No, I think it's, from an actor's perspective, I found it more is kind of like an adventure, really. I mean, you're like, okay, how do I play this one? How do you want this one? And it's just like a adventure. I mean, it's I think it's better for me. It was better to do all those roles than just do one role and then just sit on the sidelines. You know what I mean? So I appreciate it and I thank you for it. And it's I think one of the best things that I've ever done behind a film was on one of your films, which I think was what's the name of it? The one where I had to slice my throat.
Oh,
Uh,
Conduit.
Conduit.
Yeah.
Conduit. That was pretty amazing. That was like I was so excited.
It was so funny. So I have all these actors, and they're you all are playing SWAT team members who get killed. Okay, and I think it was the second day we were doing all the death scenes, and I see all you actors huddling around. You're so excited to do your death scenes because you've never done a death scene before. And I'm like sitting there going, for some reason, I had in my head that they'd done a death scene before and nobody had done a death scene before.
Right?
So that made
And it,
me nervous. That made me nervous because, especially with you, we had like one take to get that in.
yeah.
You know?
Yep. And well, for everyone that's watching, we'll link the videos in the show notes. All right. So you've created content for giants like Microsoft, AT&T, and Netflix. How does your approach differ when working on corporate projects compared to your indie films?
Ooh, the corporate stuff, the corporate stuff is really, really hard because there's so many cooks in the kitchen. And, you have to make sure, you know, you're hitting all the things the clients want you to hit, right? Um, and it's not that fun. It's pretty boring, but some of these things cost an astronomical amount of money to do. This I won't say the client, but there was one client, and this was about maybe 15, 20 years ago. Um, we did this whole studio shoot and it cost $800,000 to do, and we spent 3 days doing it, and it just a lot of wasted money because there's more people involved in the corporate environment. When you do a short, um, some of my shorts do cost a lot of money, but I mean, the money's all up on the screen. It's not going to overhead. It's not going to having five production managers or anything like that. So
Yeah.
um, when making shorts, it's more streamlined because I mean, at the end of the day, you know, whether or not the movie is good or bad or mediocre, it all falls on me. It's I'm writing it, I'm producing it, I'm directing it, I'm making the choices, and hopefully I'm listening to people around me that have some ideas or think it might be, hey, if we shot this over at this angle, this might be a little bit better. Hopefully I'm listening to people around me like you or Matt or Ayuba even, and we get the best possible short film we can, but there's less bureaucracy in it for the most part.
Okay.
as opposed to doing all the corporate stuff.
So the divorce. You were the executive producer. What drew you to that project, and what was your experience as an executive producer?
Not much. I supplied some of the money for it, and that was it. So I got the script from I think it was Nadine. I got the script from Nadine, who's in a couple of the short films I did. You were in one or two with her as well too, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, because her friend wrote this, and I read it, and I was thinking, okay, it's a 15-page script. You know, I'll read, I'll read a couple pages, and I'll go make some dinner, and maybe come back to it later. And I just sat there and read it, and it was like this black comedy, and it was so funny, and I mean, it was a page turner. And so I was like, man, I want to help her out because I've seen one of her other shorts called The Brazilian, and it was almost like slapstick comedy, but it was funny. So she had talent. I was like, this is the next step for her in her filmmaking career because it was a black comedy. Black comedies can be kind of hard to do. You have to get the tone right for them, and I thought the tone in the script was really good, and so I just wanted to help her out in whatever way I could. So I wasn't down there for the shoot because I think they shot it in New Mexico. But I wasn't there for the shoot or anything like that. And but I just helped out with some money that they needed, and so that was my executive producer duties on that.
Easy peasy. Now you work in AI, and how has your work in AI influenced your filmmaking, if at all?
It really hasn't right now, you know. It really hasn't. You know, the funny thing is when you work at Microsoft like I do, doesn't matter. I mean, I work in AI there, but it's very much about storytelling. And when you're coming up with ideas or concepts, you need to present it as a story. So it's kind of funny. A lot of people just don't have storytelling skills, and it is a skill to have. Now, I'm not saying I'm a master storyteller or anything in the least bit, but I do know that, a director friend of mine, 30 years ago told me when you're making a short, the only thing you need to remember is to have a beginning, middle, and end to it. You know, just don't shoot a scene because nobody's going to understand what just that scene means. It's so out of context. So at least shoot a beginning, middle, and end. So there's context in there. So I try to always keep that in mind. I mean, I guess that's how I bring some of my filmmaking into my job is if I have to come up with a story, I'm always thinking of a beginning, middle, and end to it. So,
So your background includes leading creative teams, 3D teams, video motion teams. How do you balance the creative part versus the managerial part as far as your roles go?
well, usually you're one or the other. If you're managing, you're not really being too hands on. Um, you're more you're being a people manager, which I call like being an amateur psychologist in a lot of ways, because you're really any good manager you're not sitting there thinking, I'm the boss and I rule with an iron fist. You should be working for your team. What can you do to make their lives easier? And uh, that's what you always have to keep in mind. A lot of people don't approach it that way. I mean, there's tons of different management approaches, but that's the way I like to look at managing a group of creatives. The other thing you have to do with creatives is you have to get out of their way so they can do good work. You've got to give them time to breathe. You've got to give them time to think about things. You just can't have them in back to back meetings for 8 to 10 hours a day. It gives them no time to think and no time to breathe. So they can let the creative juices flow. I mean, I can be in meetings for 8 hours a day and then I don't have any creativity left in me. All the energy's kind
Yeah,
of sucked out of me because I've been talking about 12 different things over the course of 8 hours. So
yeah. I think that's the one thing I've realized in myself is that There's so many things you can do in a day and so many tasks that you can do. And even at work, there's so many things that you can focus on. But I think when you're, I mean, literally, if you're bored or, and this is, I think this is why people say they get these ideas in the showers because you're not doing anything other than taking a shower and things just start clicking for you and your creative aspirations start developing and your thoughts and the imagination. And I've noticed that about myself is that for me to even write a script, I have to get outside my element. I have to go to a coffee shop that's, I can't do it in the office. I can't do it in the home. I have to be somewhere else away from everything to actually let everything kind of marinate and just start developing and having your imagination go. So I think that's really important.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100% there because there's I come up with some of my best ideas when I'm not in front of the computer at all. I can be out on my patio looking at mountain views, or you know, I could be laying in bed and I can't sleep and I'm just laying there, and then, if I'm having trying to work through a problem in a script or something like that, maybe the idea will come to me and I'll just get on my phone and text myself
Yeah.
excuse me, what it is. So um, you know, the problem solving for me is never in front of the computer. I have to get away from the computer to do that. You know,
Mhm. So let's talk about film festivals and awards. So your films have been featured in various film festivals around the world and have won several awards. And I mean, like
a couple.
a ton. I don't think I've ever met anyone that's won so many awards as your films. What impact do these have on recognitions and as far as your career goes in approaching to filmmaking?
Interesting. You know, the way I look at film festivals is this: what you're hoping for is, a producer's assistant to be at the festival and see your movie and say, "Wow, I want to meet that person and talk to that person," or a manager's assistant or an agent's assistant or whatever the case is. You're just trying to get some exposure out there so people will know your name and who you are, and hopefully your work's good enough that they want to collaborate with you, whether they want to represent you or whether they want to read a feature script that you've written and try to get that made. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And the problem with it is you have to be you have to get into like major festivals in order to get really the a lot of recognition, like Sundance or TIFF or whatever the case is. Like the awards are all fine and good, and hopefully they bring a lot of exposure. Um, and that's what it's like, a numbers game almost. It's with the festivals. You're just trying to see, hey, maybe somebody will see it through this festival. But I know, like, if it gets in the Tennessee International Film Festival, the chances are pretty low that somebody's going to see it there. But
Yeah.
it's all about exposure. And if you can't get into those big festivals, which it's very hard for any movie to get into those festivals, um, then you're just hoping that somebody will see it at one of the mid-tier festivals at that. So, it's really hard. I mean, it's really hard. It's a numbers game. I guess that's all. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah. So you've had three feature screenplays option. Can you tell us, like, what are the projects and what does it mean to have something optioned? What does that mean?
Well, option means that a producer wants to take the script and, develop it with you a little bit more. They may want you to do some rewrites, some free rewrites on it. But they want to take it out to directors or actors to get these people attached so they can get more financing, or they can, I mean, it's essentially packaging is what they want to do. If, like, on one of my scripts, they wanted to get a director attached, and they figured if they got a director attached, they could get an actor attracted to the project. And then at the same time, another one of my scripts, they were trying to get an actress attached, so then it would attract a director to the project. So it all depends on who's packaging it and which way they want to go. But the other thing is when you are when you have a script and you're working with a producer and you're doing rewrites and they want to go out to actors first, what they're going to do is they're going to talk to the actor's agent or manager and they're going to say, hey, what kind of movies are they looking to do? Oh, they're looking for action thrillers where they could be, you know, um, yeah, I don't know, like uh, a grandmother who's babysitting the grandchildren, and then the killer breaks in and they fight them off. It's like, okay, you need to rewrite your main character so it's a grandmother who's fighting off a babysitter. But, and then you're like sitting there going, but, that's not what the script's about.
Yeah.
And so and that's an extreme case. I kind of had one time when it was kind of like that and it was almost laughable. But a lot of cases, you will change your main character to accommodate an actor what they're looking for. And so you have to be flexible because as a writer, I mean, you don't have that much power at all. If you want to get your movie made, you need to be able to work with people. I think that's the most common misunderstanding. Unless you're Aaron Sorkin, you know, um,
Yeah.
you're really not going to have a say in anything. And you better be easy to work with, or, when the movie does get financed, they're just going to fire you and bring in their own writer, pay for it. So, and that's
Right.
usually what happens. That's usually what happens. They'll give you one more pass on it. And then maybe the actor says, hey, I worked with such and such writer on my last project and really loved her. And I want to bring her on to rewrite this script. And the producers are like, okay, and you're gone. And I mean, that hasn't happened to me, but I think the best piece of advice I can say is, you know, you want to be somebody that people want to work with. If you're arguing with them about every little detail, they're not going to want to work with you and you're going to get labeled as difficult to work with. And you don't want to be labeled as difficult to work with because you want to get more work. So
Right.
you want to make more movies.
So one of the things, this is why I call you my mentor, because with your experience and the films that you've made and the stories that you've written, I've seen how you work, and I see how you work with your crew and the cast, and how it's not that many people, and you get quality stuff. And the other part of it is that you handle visual effects, you handle sound mixing, you edit, you have the technical aspect of editing as well. I think that's what spoke the most to me is like, okay, he's a one stop shop and he can do all these things. I can do this too. How
you
would you
forgot you
say?
forgot color grading.
And
Okay. The one thing that I hate is color grading, but it's a necessity.
I'm still learning. I'm still cousin was my first time trying to color grade, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. That's why you'll see it. You'll see it, right?
going
The
through going through every single shot in color grading is not the most fun experience when you have like 400 shots in your
right,
movie.
exactly. And I'm learning that. But I want to know is how your technical skills, how does it enhance your storytelling? I mean, do you say to yourself, "Oh, I could do that, so I'm going to put it in my film," or is the idea that you wrote down thinking, "How would I edit that?" and then you put it in the film? How does that all work?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. It's kind of a combination. So in Nemesis, there's a part where a Yuba's character gets his hand cut off. Okay, and it originally wasn't like that in the script. Um, in the script, he was supposed to get impaled with the chainsaw, and so that was the original idea. And I had this whole bodysuit thing I was going to get where it looked like somebody's stomach was open and chainsaw would be there and have blood splattering out and all that. But excuse me, there were two problems with it. When it came down to it was like, I don't know, 2 months before we were shooting or something. I'm like, this is going to take a lot of time to set up this shot, to get the blood coming out. I mean, getting that whole apparatus on would be the easy part, but making sure you get the shot right, you get the gore effects right. Sure, you could do some of the blood in post and all that, but I don't know how real it would look. And so I was like, there's got to be something that could be as effective, because I just feared it was going to take too long to set up that shot. And so, or to get all the shots I needed to make it look good. Um, so what I did was I changed it. I was watching this behind the scenes documentary of how they made one of the James Bond movies. And James Bond was flying a plane and it went through an airplane hangar. And
I saw a
um,
clip of that today. I
oh, did
literally
you?
saw that today.
Okay, so they did a forced perspective on that, which is they shot the real hangar and the camera was maybe 100 yards away from the hangar. They built a little hangar door that they put in front of the camera to look like it was one of the hangar doors, and the hangar was here. Then they had a little middle model airplane that went between the two, so it looked like it went through the hangar. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So what if I could do that with a hand getting cut off? So I had to get the fake hand that could grip on top of the chainsaw, um, and or it was the minigun. I'm sorry, it was on the minigun, and then I was using from working with Damien. It was some it was the gloves that the actor Damien was wearing in that, and it looked all fleshy and everything. And Yuba put that on, and it looked like it was Stump. And so we had the minigun with the hand here, where we were all holding. I think three of us were holding the minigun up.
Yeah.
The stump was right here, and the minigun hand was here. And so when you brought the chainsaw through it, there was like a foot and a half of space between both, but the way we shot it, they looked like they were together. And so we shot that from a couple different angles, and it worked out awesome. It worked out really good. So that was a way where I could feel like I could still get some of the, you know, the gore, if you will, in the movie, but do it in a cheap way where it wasn't going to cost a lot of money to do. The only thing I had to buy the hand, the fake hand, it wasn't that expensive, but the shots would be easy to set up and it wouldn't take a whole lot of time to do. With the whole chest thing and getting stabbed in the chest with a chainsaw, I was like, that's just going to be a nightmare. We're going to have tubes come through the person. We're going to have to pump blood out. And then we got to think of cleaning all that up. and,
Yes.
and it would take more time to shoot that than I figured. That it was, I don't think it would be worth it. I figured we could get the same effect with the hand getting cut off, the fake hand getting cut off, and the chest being open. But those are things you kind of figure out, like when you start looking at your shot list and you're like, God, these are a lot of shots. I need to figure out where I can cut down on this. So that's part of, there's trade-offs you have to do, and also like, man, I want to do all these dolly shots, and then you realize, it's going to take a lot of time to do this. So why don't we just do it on a gimbal? I can stabilize it more in post, and it'll look like a dolly shot. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I hope that
It's
answered your question.
No, it does. It does. It's always interesting, like, practical versus doing things in post. The time and expenses. There's one actor that makes horror films, and he was at the West Sound Film Festival, and I watched some of his films. And the first thing I thought was, what a mess! How would you, like, blood everywhere, squirting out everywhere? And I'm like, what? Do you just throw the rug away after it just spills onto the rug? And I said, well, what? How do you clean up that? He goes, a lot of plastic. He put out a lot of plastic, and he even said, like, one of the houses he used was his, like, brother-in-law's or something. And he said even in the wood, the crevices, there's still stained blood inside.
Oh yeah.
And it's green blood. It wasn't even red blood. It was a elf blood, and I was just like, oh, what a mess! What a mess!
Oh yeah. So the first two short films I did, were shot in a townhouse that I had. And never shoot in your own house. Your house will get destroyed. Um, but there was a shot where the bad guy stabbed the hero in it. And then when they pulled out the knife, all this blood came out. Okay. And
Oh,
so, it was a close up. So that was good. But it was one of those things we had to put a tube through the costume. We put black poly sheeting up along the walls and on the floor. And, um, you know, after the shot was done, we did it like 2 or 3 times. We just literally wrapped up the poly sheeting, make sure we weren't getting blood stains everywhere. I still had to clean up fake blood off a little splatter here on the wall, a little on the carpet here. Yeah. I don't like using real like the fake blood because it is messy,
yeah.
and that's why I got those fake, like what do you call them, the blood, um
Yes. Those silicone
yeah,
blood spills,
the,
pools.
the
I
blood
love that.
spills, because you just
I
throw them
love
down
it.
on the ground. Okay, just lay your head on it, done. No mess.
It's a brilliant idea. When I saw that, I was like, oh, I love it. It's not going to stain anything. Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
yes, it's just so easy because it won't stain anything. There's no cleanup. They're not that expensive either. And I mean, do you have those? The ones I had? Do you
Yeah.
have those? Yeah, like
Yes, sir.
I've used them in like 3 movies, and so they've, you know, worth their weight
Yeah.
in gold, actually.
I actually, there's a shot I used it in Cousin, and you barely see it. It's when he's picking up his toe. We actually had it underneath Philip's foot
Oh,
to
okay.
kind of have it show. But I mean, otherwise, when the toe gets cut off, that's all digital. I just did a digital thing, so I thought that'd be easier. But now I know you're looking to make a feature film and work in that. What what excites you the most about transitioning from doing a short versus a feature?
Mhm. I would say it's just like having just that longer format. You know, with with Safe, that was an 8 minute long short film. Then Ricochet was 12 minutes, and then Nemesis was like 17. So they're getting longer and longer as they go along. They're getting bigger and bigger and longer and longer. So I feel like it's like the next evolution because I could make another short film. I don't want to spend 60 grand on a short film. At that point, people are like, you might as well make a feature, which you should. But I'm like, well, what am I going to make for 60 grand that's going to impress people, that will sell, that I could see my money back actually at that point? Um, I'm not the, as you know, I'm not the kind of filmmaker that's going to like make a short film about two people sitting around complaining about life at a coffee shop. That's just not my style. So I just want to make something bigger. And the issue with at least the feature I do want to make that's written is it just costs money. It's not it, it actually should be a $3 to $5 million like Blumhouse kind of movie. I could actually have a shot at directing it that because nobody would lose any money. But this one's probably about an $8 to $10 million movie, which they probably wouldn't let me direct because it just costs too much. Um, and I totally get it, and that's fine. But I got to figure out like a, a different kind of movie to write that is in that $3 to $5 million range that I could direct, that I would be excited about, um, as much as the $10 million one that I want to make. The $10 million movie I could do if the first one does really well, then I could go on to do that. But that's the
Right.
one I'm really excited about though, because it has it's that thriller with elements of action and sci-fi and horror in there, like kind of my shorts. It's kind of, I feel like my
Yeah.
calling card in a way, you know.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing that I think you're unique on is you. I mean, there's a lot of horror films out there that have the thriller aspect, but when you add in the sci-fi, that totally changes it on its head and makes it a little bit more interesting for people to watch, right?
I think that's what I like though, where I don't like being stuck in one genre because I feel like people know what to expect. If you make a horror film, a lot of people are like, okay, I can see where this thing's going, right? Um, but if I'm doing like a thriller or something like Nemesis, and it kind of turns into action, and then you have elements of horror in it, and then you have sci-fi, it's like game over. I don't know where this thing is going to go,
Yeah.
which is a good thing because you keep people on their toes. Because usually, if you sprinkle in some action and some horror and some sci-fi into that thriller element, not too much, not too little, people are going to enjoy it because they weren't expecting it. So
What your experience? You have a wide range of experiences from the corporate world to indie filmmaking to writing, directing, editing, producing. What kind of advice would you give someone who is trying to get into the field in any of those arenas? Would
you
you
got
do
to
anything
just
different?
you got to create content, and I mean that's all you got to do. I mean, you just got to create content. I mean, I was lucky enough to partner up with Matt doing this. He was our cinematographer on so many movies where he had a red camera, so we were shooting really good. But I mean, start shooting content like good content. You know, I mean, you see a lot of these like reels on Instagram and stuff where it's just fun, funny content. But if you're getting a lot of views, I mean, you could start a career like in marketing doing that stuff. Now, if you're looking to make movies or TV, you got to do shorts. They could be 3 minutes long. They can be 5 minutes long. I always tell people try to keep it under 10 minutes. You won't lose your audience then. So you got to start making content, and you got to make content in the genres you want to be in. You can't make a horror short if you want to do comedy. You know, so
Right.
um, excuse me. And the best thing I tell people is watch movies. Just watch movies, read scripts, you know, see what's good. I mean, what excites you? I mean, is it ghost stories? Is it movies like Taken, or Deadpool? Like if you like Deadpool is a good example. Just such a mix of genres, right? And so um, the thing was like, and I'll just bring this up. Like John Wick is a really good example. The first movie I really liked because it was about a man who's who was in love with his wife, who he was going for revenge because of his dog. Okay, now and this is just my opinion. I like the second one for what it was. His character was already established. You had some great villains in there. And then when you got to the third and fourth one, all it was John Wick killing like 100 people at a time. In every action sequence, I felt like it moved away from the emotional aspect of his character. So I was just sitting back like, I just don't even care what happens anymore because I just see 100 faceless goons that are being killed left and right. I've seen short films that try to do action like that, where they just dive into all this action, and you just don't care about anybody. You can't do that. You have to care about your protagonist in these stories. You just have to care. Set up the character so you care, even if it's like a couple minutes into your movie before a gun shootout. Like I feel like I got criticized a lot in Nemesis because it took so long to get to the action in Nemesis. It took 7 minutes. Out of a 17-minute long movie, it took 7 minutes because I was trying to establish characters in a story, And I was
Yeah.
like, it was kind of interesting to me. It's just like, well, I would think people would appreciate that I'm trying to develop some characters here. But
Right.
I guess not. What do I know? But you know, you gotta love the characters. People forget about plot, and your characters are going to help establish your plot. So write good and unique characters. You know, that's my best piece of advice.
It kind of reminds me of what people were saying about CGI is don't have a movie that's mainly CGI, but have a movie that if you need to use CGI, it enhances the story, right? Versus because that's what's going to stick is the story itself, not just CGI. So
I think that's the other thing. Like when I do my shorts and I know I'm going to do the visual effects in them, I make sure I know I can pull off the visual effects and I know they're going to look good. Um, if I don't think I can pull it off and it's not going to look good, then I won't. I might cut something out because I'm like, I think that's too ambitious, because I don't want to spend 3 months working on two visual effects shots. Like, I have to know. I mean, I know my limits. Like every short I've done, I've gotten better and better with the visual effects I've done. Just
Yeah.
practice makes perfect. But um, yeah, you know, I tried to do a mix of visual effects and practical effects. I mean, I think in a lot of my movies, you can see where the visual effects are. That's fine. I don't care, but um, you don't want them to be a distraction, I guess is what I'm saying. You want them
Right.
to have that you want to be a part of the story. I mean, I saw some short films. I what was it during the safe run and festivals, and there were some visual effects that were just absolutely horrible. It was like they didn't know what they were doing. I'm like, how did this even get into a festival? I mean, I look, I'm not saying I'm the best or anything, but when you're trying to do some sort of Starship Troopers or Star Wars ripoff, your visual effects better be damn good. I've seen some really good ones too, by the way. Some
Oh yeah.
sci-fi short films that have just been phenomenal, and I'm scratching my head like, how did they even do that? Oh, they shot it all on the stage on a green screen, and they created this practical orb, and then they did. I'm like, how much money did all this cost? you
Right. It
so,
seems like
like, but then
it
I've
always
seen ones
boils
with
down to.
really horrible visual effects in it too that look like somebody just didn't know what they were doing, and it's embarrassing when you see that. So, I say if you know people that can do like Hollywood quality visual effects and they're willing to do it for you and willing to do it like good for you, awesome. But if you're doing it yourself and do some test footage, I say do some test footage and see if you can pull it off with your footage. And if you can't, maybe rethink that visual effects a little bit. It's like it's what it comes down to one of those things like we've talked about. You have to like cut your babies sometimes, Um,
Yes.
meaning you might have to cut your favorite shots or your favorite sequences out of the movie that you just absolutely love, but you realize it's not pushing the story forward. And it's like the pacing's all off if it's in there, but you love that shot.
Right. Are you working on anything now?
I'm just working on I'm just doing rewrites on my feature script now. Um,
Mhm.
my the $10 million one. So hopefully, and I'm talking to producers with it too. But I'm trying to work out some of the rough edges on it, and I don't work on it every day, and I probably should. But sometimes, after my day job, I just don't have the energy to even think straight with it. But that's what I'm
Yeah.
working on, and it's kind of fun, you know, working on it because I think sometimes I'll write things and sometimes they're more convoluted than they need to be. And it's just like simplify, simplify, simplify the story. Have everybody understand what you're trying to do. That's so, and it sounds really easy, but sometimes things are too simple, and
Yeah.
they need to be layered more. So you got to find that combination of having something that's easy to understand, but it's very much rich and layered with characters and, you know, uh, not only just characters in those character moments, but, with the sequences as well. So they just don't come across really flat. So,
Yeah. I think that's a key thing when people watch films that are very predictable, you know. If it has a bunch of layers in it, then you kind of people don't know where direction you're going to go or who's who, what's going on. I think those are films that I are drawn to, is stuff that makes you think, you know.
well, also it makes your characters more three-dimensional too, instead of
Yeah.
two-dimensional. I mean, again, going back to the John Wick analogy, that was supposed to be a direct-to-video movie. Keanu Reeves wasn't even in anybody's minds to star in that movie. And if you think about it, it wasn't like his character was too complex in that movie. that was a B movie that, skyrocketed through the stratosphere because of that dog element. That was the emotional bond he had, his connection to his dead wife was that dog. And so, like, it's something so simple. It's not like it hasn't been done before. It's been done before. And
Yeah.
so people don't think about, like, you just got to figure out a new twist on all of that, you know, um, to make things interesting. I mean, that's what I say, at least. It's like you don't want to copy something. You want to take something that somebody had that that worked, but put your own spin on it.
Yes. Yes. That's some good advice. What is your favorite production tech?
Oh God. I think last time I talked, I said the jib, which
Yes.
I do like the jib, I like the smoothness, the height you can get and coming down really fast without crushing the camera. It just takes too many people with the jib and the remote head, and okay, I love the jib, but after we talked, I was like, yeah, I also like the drone, because when you're outside, especially, you can get those beautiful shots high above, or you know, even like, I mean, one of the end credit sequences we did for Conduit, it was all done with a drone and outside and inside. And like,
Yeah.
okay, just use the drone for all this. And, it's kind of fun because it can replace like a dolly or a gimbal. If you don't have access to that kind of stuff, so it's a cheap way to get some cool shots. If you're good at operating the drone. I think the thing with people when it comes to the with drone shots, you got to think boring. Like this, a small shot with like something moving in slow or moving up slow or down slow. Just get like 15 seconds of that or something. That's all you need. It doesn't have to be zooming all over the place. And people are like, what the hell's going on? And the camera doesn't need to be going all over the place. Like um, the nice smooth shots people will appreciate with drone shots.
Yeah. I actually did a drone shot for the cousin, the opening title, Remember 10. What are your thoughts on AI when it comes to the film industry?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Um, people talk about AI taking over. AI can be good. I can see it can have great benefit. Like if you're looking to fill in a stadium with 70,000 people, right? AI can help out with backgrounds and that kind of stuff. Um, and sure, there's like short films that have been made with AI. I don't really think they're that good so far, at least the ones I've seen. But I feel like it's another tool in the filmmaker's chest, and you're not going to 100% rely on it right now. Um, if it can create those crowd shots of 70,000 people, or if you can create what looks like, um, you know, the interior of the Death Star hallway or something, to put on your green screen or something. Awesome. I mean, that's the kind of stuff where I feel like it will make filmmakers, they can make things look like $1 million that were done for a couple $1,000. And so I think that's like one of the things I'm excited about. But, you can also see people are probably going to use it in the wrong ways too at times. So, but I think it will definitely have an influence on how movies get made from indies to studio movies, but I think it could be for all the better, especially for the indie filmmakers.
Tim, how can people reach you?
My website, timearnheart.com. All my short films are up there. YouTube channel, Vimeo, Tim Earnheart. Just you can see all my stuff. Love it, hate it. Yeah. And yeah, that's about it. I'm always free to chat. I always love chatting with people about movies and filmmaking, and AI or whatever. So,
Well,
because
thank you, Tim.
you're far away from me since you're in Seattle. I'm in Arizona now, so it's
I know. That's so sad. It's so sad. But we will put all your links into the show notes.
cool.
And Tim, thank you so much for being on the Downing Cut. And we will definitely talk about what is going on. But until next time, appreciate it. Have a good one. And what did you? Thank you for listening to the Downing Cut. I appreciate you joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed the episode, drop a comment with your thoughts and share questions you think I should be asking the guests. Your feedback helps shape the podcast. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next episode.